Back in 1971, I was elected mayor of Fort Lee, New Jersey. I was 28 at the time, the youngest mayor in the country of a decent-sized town. Fort Lee then had 35,000 residents. I defeated a well-entrenched, corrupt machine. The chief of police met with members of organized crime in his office. The tax collector hadn't filed a tax return in over 10 years, and so on. I think you get the idea. Sometimes when we look back on our past, we can pick the exact moment when our life changes forever, perhaps for the better, perhaps for the worse, but it will never be the same again. That moment came for me on a cold winter afternoon when I was watching a hockey game on television. I had been mayor for 2 years. There was a knock on my apartment door, and when I opened the door, somebody right out of Central Casting entered. He had a scar on his cheek, a large pinky ring on a finger twice the diameter of mine, and under his jacket was a pistol. I wasn't about to ask him whether he had a license to carry it. He introduced himself as Joey D, and he said he had some urgent business to discuss with me. He told me it was a matter of life and death. He was referring to a 17-acre parcel of land virtually adjacent to the George Washington Bridge, which spans the Hudson River connecting Fort Lee and Manhattan. The property had been bought by Investors Funding, then a public company which at one time had owned Ballantine Brewery and the Boston Celtics. The land was zoned single-family, and Investors Funding was before the Fort Lee Zoning Board with a proposal to build 3 million square feet of offices, hotels, and stores. If the Zoning Board approved the proposal, the land would skyrocket in value. I appointed the members of the Zoning Board, and Joey simply wanted me to use my influence with them to put in a good word. I was against the project and tried to tell him it would be voted down later in the week, but he wasn't in the mood for bad news. If there were one thing you could say about Joey, he was persistent. It wasn't long before he offered me $500,000, a lot of money then and even now, probably the equivalent of several $1 million in today's money. It's one thing to be taught as a child that crime doesn't pay, that this kind of money is dirty money, but when that much cash was dangled before me, an amount which could put me on Easy Street the rest of my life, I had a life decision to make in real time. This was no longer some theoretical choice. I made my decision. I turned Joey down. I could never look my parents in the face again if I had betrayed everything they raised me to be. And to this day, I have never regretted that choice, not for 1 minute. But I had an even more important decision to make, one which would define me publicly for the rest of my life. Was it enough for me to simply turn the bribe down, or did I, as a public official, have an additional responsibility? The next morning, I called the United States Attorney for New Jersey and told him I had been offered a bribe by the mafia and was willing to wear a wire. He was skeptical, to say the least. What I didn't know at the time was apparently no other public official had ever offered to do this, and I am not sure anybody else has done so since. The skepticism vanished quickly when I met Joey at a restaurant, and the FBI agents sitting at the next table recognized him as a major figure in the Genovese crime family, one of the most notorious crime families, and the one the Sopranos television show was based on. I ended up meeting with Joey and one of the developers on several occasions, always wearing a wire, always with the FBI present. In addition to the $500,000, they were willing to throw in 2 blondes who could make my hair stand on end. Now there's an image worth contemplating. On one occasion, we met at a local diner. The FBI told me, if possible, not to leave the diner with Joey, but if he insisted, they would follow me in a helicopter. After the breakfast, I was frisked by Joey before I went to the men's room. By some miracle, the microphone was in my belt buckle that day, and they didn't check there. I made sure I was the only person in the men's room, and then standing over the urinal, I said over and over again, "They're going to give me the money now." The agents in a nearby van then heard something that resembled Niagara Falls. I met Joey in the parking lot where he gave me an accordion folder containing $100,000 in small bills, the good faith deposit he promised. I'll never forget his smile when he handed me the money and explained that this was just the beginning of what would be many deals to come. It was right out of Faust. Had I made a different decision, I would have been owned by these people for the rest of my life. I drove to the FBI headquarters where 12 agents counted the money. An agent bet me $1 that I would be shortchanged. I left there with a receipt for $100,000 and a crisp $1 bill. I secretly appeared before a grand jury, arrests were made, my life was threatened, and I went into hiding for several months before testifying in federal court. Ultimately, 7 individuals were implicated, found guilty, and served time. The United States Justice Department sent me a bulletproof raincoat with a label which read, "Not tested for ballistics." They also offered to enter me into the witness protection program, but since they never offered me Malibu, I declined. Almost all of the defendants have died by now, and I, on my own account, am living in Malibu with the mother of our 2 children and the love of my life. Who says some stories don't end happily ever after? If you are interested in reading more about this subject, the book The Bribe by my brother Philip Ross was just reissued, and you can get it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble in either digital or paperback format. Thank you.